here. For those of you that don't know Practical Action, we've been working in energy and mini-grids in particular for about 35 years. A lot of that has been in terms of demonstrating technology and trying to generate interest in rural electrification and mini-grids. Obviously, you know, a lot of experience down the line. And we're focusing more and more into, you know, where is the sort of viability of mini-grids, and so looking at the sort of different aspects of that, the ongoing cost or the upfront costs of implementing, building, ongoing costs, financing. The policy and regulatory environment is another area where we've done a lot of testing, if you like to put it, going into areas that are not had mini-grids in before, working often quite closely with the Rural Energy Authority or the local government, Ministry of Energy, to see how we can actually operate mini-grids. Often we find that the legislation just isn't there. The legislation is all aimed at the main grid and the mini-grids that falls underneath it. Looking at what revenues can come in from mini-grids, trying to balance income and running costs, and then of course the technical design aspects of the work. So today we're just sort of really looking at two aspects of this. Myself, I'm going to be sort of looking slightly at productive uses to start with, and then Louise, who's a colleague of mine from Practical Action Consulting, is going to talk about a project that we're doing in Malawi around business model ideas. So last year we finished a 5-year project funded by the EU, which we've called the Southern Africa Regional Hydro Project. The project installed 12 micro-hydro schemes in Malawi, Mozambique and Zambia. The communities were generally well off the grid, often very poor communities, very low capacity to pay, very, very unlikely to get electricity from the main grid in any reasonable time span. You know, we'd be looking 20, 30 years before the main grid ever gets there. The schemes have run ranging from about 17 kilowatts up to 88 kilowatts. I think that's the biggest that we did. A lot of work, probably too much work to try and do. 12 mini-grid, you know, micro-hydros. Lots of problems in that. Lots of learning, of course. Especially with the smaller systems, you know, 17 kilowatts, and we've had experience of smaller as well. There's often the demand for electricity within a community far exceeds the capacity of that system to ever provide for it. So how do we balance, you know, who gets what, where's the priority for the energy? Communities have often prioritised schools and clinics, community facilities. I was in one of our visiting one of our schemes a while back, and they were sort of talking about how women didn't have to use candles at night to give birth. How refrigeration meant that vaccination rates has all gone from very, very low, sort of sub 10% to nearly 100% in the village. So the community's priorities are often not necessarily what we would say is our priorities, especially in the light of an underpowered system, if you'd like to put it, a bit like that. Household connections, the cost of household connections, especially the less dense the population and the more spread out the community, the higher the cost of connecting to households. And that's whether or not you use a metered system or not, and we've used both metered and unmetered systems. And often it really does not pay the system to connect households. The willingness and the ability to pay will not pay unless you've got a very, very dense village centre. Priorities, sorry I've written that wrong. We need to, one of the lessons is prioritising productive use of energy. That is what we have found is the way that is going to pay for these systems that we've been installing. I think this has come up again and again today. Community engagement and community ownership is really important. Both in terms of providing the management of the system, but if we look at the wider governance of the system as well. There was a micro hydro in one community where the stream was running dry during an extended drought period, and the farmers wanted this water for irrigation. The micro hydro people, committee running the micro hydro, obviously wanted the water for the micro hydro, and they had to come to some agreement. Now, if that had not been community-based, then it wouldn't have been so easy to facilitate that agreement. And in the end, they decided, during the day the farmers had the water, during the night the micro hydro had the water. An easy solution, if you've got people that can work together, didn't require us as an organisation to go in and do that facilitation of that issue. Equally, there was another hydro scheme that we put in very early on, and it's had some problems. We've got sort of fairly innovative and new technology in some way, certainly in those communities, and if things go wrong, somebody needs to repair it. But the system was supplying mainly a school, a clinic and a few households. And the households were paying, I think, $10 a month, the school and clinic $20 a month. It was generating enough revenue to keep the system going, but when it hit a problem, because it was embedded in the community could start to generate funds to pay for those repairs. So very, very important in terms of the sustainability of the systems. The problem with that community-led model is that there isn't a vehicle within there to scale. There's no driver to take that to the next village and the next village and the next village. And that's certainly something that we've been grappling with and something that Louise will touch upon. But the other thing was that, this is a mindset and I think it's especially relevant to microhydro, is that you install a system and it's a 50 kilowatt system, and it's the sort of mindset is, well, that's it, that's the system, it's there, it's not going to grow, and yet people's demand for electricity will grow, especially if you've got some economic growth within the community. Somebody who has lights this year might want a fridge next year or a television, whatever. New businesses, and we have seen new businesses coming into communities because they know that there's electricity there. So we need to start thinking about, well, how do we establish systems, and when I say systems, I don't just mean the hardware, the software, and the management and what have you, that will enable growth within the community in which it's seen, and to be able to respond to economic growth around. We had a chance to work with Oxfam on a project in Ruti, which is in Zimbabwe, semi-arid area. There's in the 70s a quite substantial dam had been built to irrigate the sugar fields about 200 kilometres from this site. The dam was built with a 30% excess capacity to serve the local community, but that had never been done. That work had never been done to connect the local community. So the work that we did was, you can see the dam in the background up there, was to build this powerhouse down here. That's 3 kilowatts, by the way. To pump water up to a holding tank. This is when it was under construction, this was last year sometime, when I visited, that would then feed down into the system, and this is later this year, this photograph, and it's under production there. An advantage of this, I know it's not a mini-grid as such, but the advantage of this system, there's no actual battery storage. So there's a lot less complexity and a lot less cost involved in this. The powerhouse around the back of it, you can't see here. We are developing, it hasn't been finished yet, we're developing like a repair workshop and other facilities for the farmers who are using this irrigation scheme. And we're looking into how we can construct or convert one of these rooms into like a cold storage for vegetables, because, and you can see there's a very hot area, your vegetables last a day and then they're sort of going off a bit, and then nobody wants to buy them, even if you can get somebody from town to come and pick them up. One of the things that farmers face in this area is that you need to build up enough bulk of product to be able to attract somebody to come along with a truck to pick it all up in one go and go off to market with it. Now, this project is actually followed on another project that Oxfam did slightly just downstream, and this is a gravity-fed system, irrigation system, that I think it was 40 hectares, this system. And I was talking, sorry, it's a bit difficult to see, but this is like a distribution tank here that then channels off to different directions in the irrigation scheme. And up here, I think that's maize, if you can see that up there. I was talking to the farmers there, and they were saying that before this irrigation scheme, they were getting about 400 kilos per hectare of maize. With this irrigation scheme, they're now getting 4 tonnes per hectare, so it's 10 times the yield, and it's reliable, which means if the rains fail, they've still got a crop there, whereas before it would just have totally failed. And they can do 3 crops a year, not all maize, because that would deplete the soil, but they can rotate different crops around and have 3 crops a year. So massive increase in productivity. So that sort of, this work got us thinking about how can we put that into a mini-grid context. And so we're developing a project at the moment. We've got some funding, we're looking for more funding for this, but to have a system where you have a central powerhouse and to prioritise an irrigation scheme as the financial, the generator of the finance and the viability of the whole scheme. The school and the clinic are, as I said, often a priority of the community, and we've got good relationships with the Rural Energy Authority down in Zimbabwe, and so we're very much sort of like looking to them to support connections into the community, into the clinic. Again, someone was saying just before about connecting the business centre. So that's the sort of next priority. And then thinking about battery charging as a business or number of businesses to distribute to local households. And only after that we start thinking about connecting households. The idea behind all that is that we build in the mindset that this is a system that's going to grow and expand as things develop. And hopefully, as I said, we've got some funding for it, we're moving ahead with it down in Gwanda, which is right in the south of Zimbabwe. And we've certainly got enough for the first 2 bits on there to start on one community. So hopefully I can come back in a year's time, or go to Southampton in a year's time and report back on how this is going. But it's an exciting piece of work here. I'm going to hand over to Louise now, who's going to talk more about another scheme.
Thanks, Tim. So a project that's innovating to try to address the ongoing cost aspects of mini-grid viability is MEGA in Malawi. And MEGA stands for the Malanje Electricity Generation Agency, and it's a multi-site mini-grid program based on micro-hydro. The current status of the program is that we have 1 scheme operational, the 2nd scheme under construction, and funding for the 3rd scheme is in the process of being secured. MEGA is a social enterprise with a focus on cost minimisation rather than profit maximisation, but still with the imperative to achieve commercial viability in order to deliver this 10-year business plan, which envisages 10 schemes, around 1 per year, around the Malanje Mountain district. The schemes will be between 40 and 100 kilowatts each. Break-even is expected in year 6 after the 5th turbine is commissioned. The MEGA is a partnership of various organisations. The founding members were the Malanje Mountain Conservation Trust and the Malanje Renewable Energy Agency and Practical Action. The Mountain Conservation Trust is now the majority owner and is a protective trust in terms of watershed conservation and environmental management. The Renewable Energy Agency is the business developer and the site developer for the project, and Practical Actions providing technical assistance. There's a degree of community ownership of MEGA as well. So an important feature of the MEGA system is that the same organisation is present through the design, construction and the operation phases. There's no precarious handover, which might sometimes cause problems with other schemes. So why do we think that the MEGA business model is better placed to achieve commercial viability? First, thinking about isolated village-scale mini-grids. Village-level operation, maintenance and management can have limited capability in terms of carrying out more complex repairs and maintenance or administering more complex revenue collection schemes. And a small and isolated village-scale mini-grid might not generate sufficient revenue to fund a permanent skilled O&M and management presence. On the other hand, a multiple mini-grid scheme under a local off-grid electricity authority can be a more business-like organisation with the capacity to employ permanent skilled staff. It could generate a larger, steadier aggregated revenue stream. The centralisation of core business functions can lead to economies of scale, And there can be wider options for revenue collection models, such as prepaid smart meters, which become feasible when you've got a larger aggregated scheme. And finally, of course, there's learning across the site and from each stage of the project development. A few of the challenges that Mega has faced in particular. Firstly, there's an ongoing dependence on donor funding to cover the capital costs. And there's a temporary dependence on donor funding to cover a proportion of the operating costs, at least until year 6, when the scheme will break even. There have been technical issues with the quality of equipment and design, and a lack of availability of local engineering skills. There have been some challenges associated with new technology, such as prepaid meters, and again, another theme, communications and community relations has been a challenge, with some misunderstandings about project timescale and sometimes a lack of trust because of delays in the programme delivery that it will ever happen at all. So, finally, I'll deliver a few thoughts about productive uses and mini-grids. The big hope for mini-grids is that they're able to enable and sustain a virtuous cycle of poverty reduction, which could be depicted something like this, with investment in electricity access leading to improved electricity access, that enabling more productive uses of that electricity, more income generation, and therefore more capacity to reinvest in electricity access, and a virtuous cycle being enabled and sustained. Enterprises themselves can be beneficial for mini-grids because they're able to pay higher tariffs per kilowatt hour or higher monthly fees, therefore improving the revenue of the mini-grid. And also they represent typically less dispersed loads, so they're cheaper to connect, as Tim was mentioning before. An interesting question that is being addressed through the course of some new research between Practical Action Consulting and some partners, including Terry, is seeking to answer the question, what level of electricity access is required to enable and sustain poverty escape? This research is going to look at the take-up and utilisation of available electricity access for productive purposes, and the kind of barriers that constrain that take-up and utilisation, or the factors that enable it. The research is going to be completed and published by the end of this year, it'll be interesting to see whether evidence says that the level of electricity access provided by mini-grids is enough to sustain these virtuous cycles. And I completely forgot to say it's a DFID-funded study at the beginning of that, so apologies. Finally, my closing comment is about the capability of mini-grids to meet the greatest needs in terms of energy for productive uses. Particularly in remote areas, the dominant productive activity there is agriculture, and the greatest unmet load in terms of kilowatts could be argued to be mobile mechanical power for agricultural machinery. For mini-grids to supply this huge unmet load in terms of kilowatts will be very challenging, to say the least. Nevertheless, mini-grids tick all sorts of other boxes related to productive uses. We've heard a lot of examples already today, and I'm sure we'll hear some more later. Provided that the mini-grids are designed and run in such a way as to enable enterprises to take up that electricity access when it's available and to use it in productive ways. Thanks very much.